Now, you wrote about the group stage, and it feels like to me, Kev, when they're talking about getting this season back underway, it feels like there's no chance we're going to have all 30 teams and we're going to complete this regular season. Like I saw Windhorse talking about this on ESPN this weekend. Like that, the chances of that are very, very dim. So we are talking about less than 30 teams.
Absolutely, that this is most likely that in some way you go straight to some sort of playoff format. You also had Damian Lillard today tell Chris Haynes of Yahoo that if the Blazers have to play again and that they don't have a shot to get into the postseason, he's going to be sitting right on the bench.
Yep.
And that is a belief, a feeling that a lot of players on non-playoff teams have. Like, is it worth it to go through 3 or 4 weeks of training camp and quarantine and preparation just to play? With no shot of the postseason? Because in that proposal, Shams mentioned that NBA sent to GMs was if the regular season were resumed, not to play 82 games, but 72 games or 76 games, which is around 6 extra games for a team or 10 extra teams for a team. That's not enough for the Blazers or the Pelicans or the Spurs to make up ground on the Grizzlies for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. It's pointless for players to play at that point, other than making up a little bit of salary. So in all likelihood, the NBA will go straight to the playoffs in some format. So it's about which one would it be?
Okay. So you have the easiest is clearly just take the 16 teams, the top 8 in the West, top 8 in the East, and then go play it out. But you outlined an entire scenario today about group stages, and this would include 20 teams being involved. So you would then have 2/3 of the league is involved in this in some way, shape, or form. And much like the World Cup, you even outlined all the way down to the random draws, and that the best teams would be then able to pick their group that they would be in, as to not be overly concerned with a group of death or something like that. So basically you would have 4 different, right? 5 team pods.
Basically, you would take the top 20 teams with the top 20 records, and you would place those teams into tiers or pots, which is something that is done in the World Cup. And that would be 5 tiers of 4 teams each. So the top 4 would be Bucks, Lakers, Raptors, Clippers, and so on and so forth, from top to the bottom 20 of the standings. And from there, you could do one of 2 things, or maybe a third or fourth. But the 2 main ones are you could randomly draw 1 team from each tier into a group. And that is to best assure competitive balance within each group and minimize the chance that there's one way overpowered group in which like a major contender is getting eliminated. Or because these top teams, Bucks, Lakers, Raptors, Clippers, all had the 1 and 2 seeds at the time the season ended, you could have them draft from these other tiers and have them select their opponents. And, there's issues with that, but it's just another idea out there. And then once the groups are determined, from there, each team would play the other teams in their group twice. So every team of the 20 would play 8 games each, which would make 80 total games being played during this group stage. And then the top 2 teams, after that's over, from each group would move on to the second round of the playoffs, with a traditional classic 7-game series resuming at that point. And in the event of a tie, my understanding is that the number 1 tiebreaker would be best regular season record. So there's inherently an advantage for teams that were better in the regular season. If, like, let's say the Bucks were in the same tier as the Kings and both of them go 4-4, the Bucks would therefore move on into the playoffs because of better regular season record. And of course, you go to standard tiebreakers with, best head-to-head win percentage and all that if regular season record were tied. But overall, Chris, I mean, I'm happy that you are into the idea of it because,
this is paradise. This is paradise for a basketball fan, Kev. You're talking about 8 games a day. You're talking about, and you even mentioned the sports betting angle,
or
sports,
some amount of games a day, like whatever it is. Like it would be like 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks of just basketball every day,
and every game matters.
Nuts.
And it would be like having League Pass for everybody.
And the thing is, and here's the big thing to me. Look, you and I have went back and forth about the play-in postseason tournament in which teams would compete for the 7 and 8 seeds, and I'm into that in a normal year. But this year, I'm not. And the number one reason is because of the fact that when you talk about giving these teams a chance to get into the postseason, because look, Memphis had the toughest remaining schedule in the league. That's just the facts here. New Orleans had the easiest. There is a chance the Pelicans would have caught the Grizzlies and grabbed the 8 seed. However, there's also a chance that the Clippers and the 2 seed, who are only 4 games ahead of the 6 seed, could have slipped down too. There could have been shuffling within the Eastern and Western Conference standings that a play-in tournament doesn't account for. That's what a group stage does. Yes. A group stage accounts for the shuffling that could have occurred from the number 1 seed, well, not from the number 1, but from the number 2 seed all the way down to the number 10 and number 11 seed. And it adds more games in the process, which can help make up for what you're losing by canceling the regular season. Overall, I look at this, and when I hadn't heard about this before Friday, but as soon as I heard of this, I was like, this is the one. And in my
it is the one, Kev.
It's the one. It's the one. And a lot of people in the NBA think it's the one too, but a lot of people also are like, is this too big of a change? I don't think so. I think it's doable. It's doable.
What are we talking about? Look. Our whole lives have changed. Everything has changed. If there's ever a time to do something like this, this is the time. And if you want to this is something that would get even the casual fan to be tuning in and to care about and to watch. And I think it could be the absolute best thing that ever happened to the NBA. And it may be something that you would look at going forward, after this season, because you have more teams involved, right? So who cares? Like now, there's going to be 20 teams involved. You have more teams caring about being able to get into this tournament, right? There's going to be 10 teams that aren't there, but 2/3 of your league is going to be able to get involved in this postseason, much like you were talking about soccer, right? And the way it works, where it's even the team that is in 21st, they're still trying like hell because they want to be part of this thing to give themselves a chance. And so when you are looking for teams not just tanking games at the end of the season for the sake of the lottery, you have that in consideration. The other thing, more importantly, the matchups. You referenced last season, and you talked about how there was only like 1 game 6, and you had a couple of sweeps, and then you even mentioned that this year, okay, we come back. Let's be fair. You and I are hardcores, so we're watching everything. Who the hell is watching Bucks Magic? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're a hardcore NBA fan, but in your stated, like, say the Bucks are in a pod and they've got the Magic, or I'm sorry, the Mavericks are in their pod, or the Grizzlies are in their pod, or because they're just going to be a little bit weaker. But you've got somebody from each tier, and all of a sudden the Bucks are in the same tier as the Denver Nuggets. Now all of a sudden you're watching, Bucks Nuggets. You're getting all these matchups that you would never get otherwise. And if I'm not mistaken, you're not leaving anybody out. Like, I get the whole Eastern Conference might not be happy with this, but the Magic would still make this thing, right? So you're not it would just be basically those extra 4 teams
in the West. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And by the way, like, one of the things that I've heard is that Eastern Conference teams have already sort of pushed back about the idea of a group stage without conferences, or the idea of a 16-team playoff without conferences as well. And one of the reasons why would be because they don't want to give up leverage when it comes to future discussions about getting rid of conferences or reseeding in the postseason. I don't think that has anything to do with what is decided this year.
No.
I think what is decided this year is totally separate from what happens in the future. It could serve as an example for what is best. But when you look at the Eastern Conference playoff teams versus the Western Conference playoff teams, there's not a dramatic difference between the top teams or the middle tier teams and the bottom tier teams that are in the postseason. There's just not. I mean, you could say the Blazers and the Kings and the Spurs and the Blazers are better than the Magic, but it's not such a dramatic difference that the Magic suddenly have a less chance now. They're screwed going against the Bucks, whether it's 1 versus 8 in the East or 1 versus 16 conferenceless. I mean, it's just the reality of it. As you said, Chris, who's going to watch that if you're a casual fan? You and I will, because we're hardcore NBA fans, because of it's our job, because it's something we choose and want to do. But for casual fans, look, the NBA needs to think about casual fans here and drawing them in. Ratings are going to be high no matter what. The Match 2 this weekend set records. The Last Dance set documentary records for ESPN. NASCAR ratings are up. Sports ratings are going to be up. But if you want to make them go boom, do you want to have 4 straight games, maybe 5 if you're lucky, of Bucks Magic? Or do you want to have a situation in which you have Bucks facing the Rockets one night, and then 2 nights later, they're facing Damian Lillard and the Blazers? And then on another night, you have the Lakers hosting the Pelicans and Zion.
It'd be unbelievable.
And then a couple nights later, they're facing Luka and the Mavericks. If you're the NBA, what do you want here? What is going to draw more eyeballs? What is going to generate more interest for casual fans, for people who want to gamble? It's clearly the group stage, far more than the 1-16 playoff without conferences, far more than the standard 1-8. And as you said, Chris, this is a great point. Because this year is so weird for all of us, we're all so used to things changing. I mean, like Jeff Probst with Survivor streaming from his house for the finale, Ryan Seacrest and all the American Idol contestants streaming from their own homes, whether it's entertainment TV or whether it's sports with Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson all mic'd up. We're used to weird stuff. And if the NBA wants to take any opportunity to try something new and innovative that could be a big hit, it's right now.